everybody, and welcome to my dialogue system. So, what am I doing? What am I up to? Well, let's see here. All right, so I've got a little CoinGen game, I'm calling it. I like to call it Enter the CoinGen. I don't know, it's cheesy, I suppose. But, you know, that's the name that I chose. Anyway, so in the game, you play as this little hero here. And let's go ahead and jump into the game. I'm going to turn down the desktop audio a little bit here. And mute that there. And here we go. Okay, so in the game, if all goes well, in the game, you play the little hero here. And I'm going to pay off some, well, I guess they're not up there. He's behind a wall there. I'm going to go up here, and you'll see this little billboard. And we'll go up, and we'll touch the billboard, and we get Welcome to Little Town. And you'll see there's ellipsis at the end, and you'll also see that the little thing lights up. And I can click on it, population 100. Stay a while. All right. If I go back, it'll repeat again. But the cool thing is if I just walk away, it will also get rid of itself. So I don't have to worry about it hanging around for too long. And whoops, whoa, aggressive little NPC there. So I get to the middle of town, and you can see, okay, you reach the middle, the center of town. Oh, and here's some, clear some folks out here. And here's a bouncing barrel. And we come over here, and what does it say? It says, welcome to Barrel's End. And I come up and click on it. This is where we make the barrels. Okay. And the nice thing is, I have it kind of scrolling in there and taking some time. So the idea is that you can quickly walk past, and you get kind of just a general idea. You come to an inn, and I didn't learn too much about it. Like, okay, I stop here. Come to an inn, and I take my time. Click on it. Loud music emanates from inside. Maybe you should enter. Okay. And I go inside. All right. So it's a nice little system. And the idea with a system like this is basically to make it, to get to the point where it's very lightweight so that people, or if I'm working with a designer, working with a collaborator, it's really easy to potentially add things to the game without writing a lot of code. So the way that I did this is I used a couple of things, and one of the key things is that I am using scriptable objects. Now, scriptable objects are a special type of class in Unity that is not based on monobehaviors, right? They're much more lightweight than monobehaviors, and they're really just meant to kind of carry data, right? They're sort of a prototype for data that's kind of separate from your game. And I've created these things called basically a little conversation. Here's a conversation. And inside a conversation is just an array of strings. Pretty straightforward. It's an array of strings. And you can instantiate them. You'll see, okay, I create a scriptable object. So I derive from the scriptable object, and I create an asset menu called a conversation. So if I come in here and I say, okay, create a conversation, I can create a new conversation, and we'll call this what? End of town, and I'll hit enter there. So there's end of town, and I can change this to be however many strings I want. So if I wanted to tell a really long story, which means someone would have to like stand there for a while and click and wait and so on, all the while potentially being shot at, or I could just say, oh, okay, I just want it to be a single string, and we'll say, you have reached the end of the main road. And since it's ... I should say something else. So you've reached the end of the main road. You are leaving little town, period. Exclamation point. Okay, so there's my conversation now. It just has those strings in it. So what do I do with the conversation? Well, there are two other pieces. Now, there is on the canvas, there is my canvas here, and now I'm going to go to my scene, and I'll double click on the canvas so you can see the canvas, and you'll notice that I have this button up here, okay? It's called a dialog, but it's really a button. And I have it right justified and so on, and the size, and it's off the screen at the moment, okay? And it's off the screen, and let's see what's on it. So it has the typical button image and this sort of stuff. And well, actually, I got rid of the button image. I just made it, just a box because I just wanted it to be a box. And there's nothing all that spectacular going on it, but it does have an animator on it. And this is a trick I learned from Brackeys. And if you haven't discovered Brackeys yet, you got to go to Brackeys on YouTube because he's got lots of amazing things. And he decided to animate his dialogue system. His is a bit different than, he implemented a little different than mine. It's a couple of things we'll say inspired, but anyway, he doesn't use scriptable objects and so on. So there is a animator on here, and the animator controller, all it has is the dialogue off the screen and the dialogue on the screen. And there is a position for each of those, right? So if we go to the animation and we choose the dialogue, maybe we see the canvas, or, well, I guess we could go all the way to the scene. And there, and we preview that. And so there's dialogue off and dialogue on, and we preview that. There it is on, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to shift those seamlessly between the two. It's kind of cool. So it moves on and off the screen using that little animation. And it's going to do that based on, I go to the animator here, the parameters. It has this on-screen or off-screen button. That's going to determine which of these, where it's going to transition to. That's all. So it's a really, really basic animation. There's no animated sprites or anything like that. Could have animated sprites if I wanted, but it's really just moving this box on and off the canvas, or on and off the visible part of the canvas. It's important to get the canvas size just right. Make sure you do that. Okay, so back to the game. All right, so on the canvas, on the dialogue, you have that thing just to enable that sort of move in and out. Now, it also has this simple script called the dialogue system. And it does have a default conversation, but don't really need to even use that. But so the default, we have this dialogue conversation. So let's go to our project and we'll say, here's the dialogue system, okay, that we're going to use. Now, in here you can see this is from a monobehavior. This does inherit from a monobehavior. So it is a normal component, which is why it's on that object there. And the important thing it gets a conversation, which is that scriptable object, and that's going to be the one that it uses to actually, it's the current conversation, right? So the dialogue has to have a current conversation that it's displaying. And as you encounter other things, they can load that conversation into this object, right? So you can start a conversation. That is how things are going to start conversations. And to start a conversation, basically what you do is you pass in a conversation to this system, okay, to this dialogue system. So what it does, it takes that conversation, it uses a queue, it basically creates a sentence queue with all the responses in it, right? So it puts all those sentences into this queue and displays the first one. Display next sentence is going to type out, kind of character by character, this piece of text by putting it into the text field. Now, so you notice here, this type text is a coroutine that handles the actual put one character at a time. Does it every 1/10 of a second, so it takes a second to type 10 characters out. And it runs through this for each, and this is the Brackeys inspired thing as well, but I think I've done this in other ones. It's basically using a coroutine with a wait for seconds of 1/10 of a second to add character by character to the to that text, to the text that's on our dialogue, on our button here, right? So it does a couple of things. it says, okay, display next sentence. First off, it says, okay, if you happen to be already typing, right? If it's already using a coroutine, I don't stop all coroutines. I only stop the current typing coroutine. You'll notice here when I start this coroutine, I keep a reference to it so that I can stop it if someone tries to type on top while something else is already typed, because I don't want them clashing with one another. So I make sure that. That's why this says this typing. If typing does not equal null, meaning you've already started typing, you started a coroutine, make sure to stop that one first and set it to null. If you haven't, you go ahead and you set the animator, this field for the animator to true if you have sentences left to put out. Right, so it'll move it onto the screen if it's not already on the screen. And then it's going to go ahead and start a coroutine, passing it in the next sentence to be dequeued. Right? So dequeuing is what pops off the next sentence out of that queue. Right? Now you'll notice I didn't do any enqueuing here because I just, when I start the conversation up here, I initialize the sentences with the responses right in there. Boom, one shot. Sentences equals new queue. Boom, push them all in there. All right. So I don't have a separate enqueue phase. I only dequeue. So I dequeue each of them. I pass that value, the string to be typed, to my type text. So for each one of these, right? And here's my actual type text. And then also have the ability to end a conversation. So to end a conversation, what happens is if you run out of things to say, you end the conversation. Or you can end the conversation as a result of leaving the box. You can have that happen as well, right? So anyway, you're probably wondering, okay, so the dialogue here is taking care of displaying things, but who is calling this actual start a conversation and end a conversation, right? And also who is saying, okay, show the next one. Now, one thing we should look at, of course, is that in here on this button, we are calling this display next sentence if you click on that button, okay? So that's the one way we are able to kind of move from sentence to sentence, right? So it displays the first one kind of automatically for you, and then each time you click, it moves to the next one, right? So that's this display next sentence is going to get clicked every time you click the button, or you could trigger it with other things, right? Sometimes display next sentence is just called by starting conversation. Got that? All right. So again, who's starting the conversation and ending the conversation, though? That is the question. All right. So sometimes the conversation does end as a result of you get to the end, you say display next sentence, and it winds up being, all right, this effectively ends the conversation as well. If you try to display the last sentence, it's going to do the same thing as this end the conversation. The end the conversation bit is kind of special, and that's how it gets rid of the conversation, not as a result of watching the whole conversation, but when you walk away, right? That's why there's the enter and exit part. That's not, Brackeys didn't show you that part. So in order to do that, I have this do dialog script. And the do dialog script is the script that actually gets put on the object that is going to be the thing that you trigger, that you bump into, the sign. It could be the doorway, sign, another character, NPC, whatever. That's the thing that's going to really trigger the conversation. That's where we call start a conversation and end a conversation, okay? So in the normal case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an object that has a trigger on it, and then that trigger, if you do on trigger enter 2D, right? So if you enter that, and I'm going to check, okay, is it the player, is it the hero that entered, so a bullet or a coin or an NPC doesn't trigger the conversation. I check, I see, okay, collision.gameObject.name, is it the player? If it is the player, then we call start a conversation on that dialogue. And I probably could have cached this in a start routine, but I didn't. It's just made it easy. So GameObject.find dialog, get component in children. It looks for that dialog system script. If it finds that script, or when it finds that script, it calls the start a conversation and passes it the conversation that belongs to this object, right? So any object, you put this do dialog script on, and you tell it what conversation to trigger, right? And at the end, you just call on trigger exit 2D if you want it, if you want some sort of ending condition or some kind of preemptive condition to just like not show it or end the conversation. So I used on trigger exit 2D so that when the player moves away from or moves out of that hitbox, out of that collider 2D, it ends the conversation, moves it off the screen again. So it gets rid of it early, right, before the last one is pressed. So in order to, let me show you how to add a new conversation element, right? Since the proof is in the pudding now. Okay, so I'll come over here into my scene, and I'll look for the camera, which is on the hero. Yeah, I'm doing this kind of a simple way. I'm going to say, all right, let's see. I had that, what was it? End of town, right? That's a conversation. You've reached the end of the main road. And let's put that down here, all right? Now, what I've done ahead of time is I have actually made a prefab that has all the components I need. And so in my prefabs, you'll see I have this billboard. And the billboard has all the normal stuff, the sprite render, the transform, and it has a box collider 2D, which is set to be a trigger, and it has the do dialog script. And by default, it has welcome to town as being the default conversation. So all I have to do is take my billboard, drop it into my scene. I'm going to drop it right there. And now I'm going to say, okay, what conversation should I trigger? And I'm going to go to my conversations, signs and conversations, and say, the end of town one. Boom, put that there. Let's give it a spin. So first I'm going to say save, press play, and here we go. First off, get rid of those guys, or pay them off. That's what I like to call it. Now you'll notice I also have to be careful, like certain signs. Okay, you reach the center of town. I don't want to touch this sign, because if I touch that sign, I get teleported. So here we are. There's our sign down here. Let's see what it says. Whoa, who's shooting at me? That was weird. Somebody's behind something. So I reach here, and it said, you have reached the end of the main road. Oh, you are leaving Little Town. All right. Now, I guess I made it a little bit too long. I don't have it dynamically changing the size of this. You have reached the end of the main. So I'll leave it to you. Wow, where's that coming from? Someone is, that's weird. There must be a bug there. Someone is shooting really, really far. I'll leave the rest to you, but I do want to show you one other cool feature. If you recognize that scarecrow here from my other game, of course, it doesn't bring me back to the shoot 'em up game. I think can I go from here? No, I guess I gotta hook that one up so that'll bring us back to the other game. But anyway, hope you found that useful and interesting. It's kind of a bonus thing. I haven't required that in any of the games thus far. So if you want to do something with the dialog system, be inspired by that. Or if you just are looking for a cool Unity dialog system starting point, give that a try. Like scripting objects, scriptable objects, very cool. And code routines, very cool. Take care.